There are three parables there. We've already talked about the first one, the lost sheep. One man that had 100 sheep, one of them's lost, and he goes in search of that one. And emphasize there that sometimes people become lost because, like sheep, they stray away from God. Not an intentional thing, not anything out of anger or bitterness, but they're just not paying attention, stray away. Then we began last week talking about the lost coin. And this is some of the things it's talking about are the same thing. It's still talking about somebody that's lost, but it's different reason why it's lost. The coin is lost, we talked about, because of the carelessness of others. And talked about how sometimes, if parents aren't careful in the rearing of their children, if they don't really emphasize the need of their child understanding about God and following Him, and it doesn't have to be one of these things, where you're really harsh and demanding, you've got to do this, do that. I don't know who the first preacher was I ever heard say that, but he said that when his child asked him one time, do we have to go to church today? He said, I told him, no, we don't. We get to go to church. And he just emphasized to them, the special privilege it was to be able to go and to worship God and not look upon it as something that's dragging or boring or whatever, but it's something to be excited about. You get to go and to worship God. And just think about that. The creator of this world, of all the universes and everything, the perfect individual, desires you to be able to gather with Him, to worship Him. And He gave His only Son to die that we might be able to do that. And so it's a great privilege we have. But then we mentioned in talking about this also that sometimes a person can be lost because of the influence that other people have over, maybe an influence for evil, that things like that can happen. And so a person can be led astray because of that. Now, still, each individual that's lost is lost because of their own sin. There may be other people who have an influence over us that may tempt us and lead us into sin, but we're still responsible for the actions we take. But this coin emphasizes the fact that there are times when people are lost because of the influence of others upon them. But now one of the things I want to begin tonight talking about in regard to this is that being lost, and please understand this, being lost, the coin in a sense becomes worthless to its owner. You say, Tim, how in the world can you say that? One of the things that you emphasized last week was the words of Jesus in talking about how that every soul is worth more than the entire world. What in the world could you give in exchange for your soul? If you was able to obtain the whole world, every bit of riches in this world, but you did it at the expense of your soul, you were the loser because your soul is more valuable than everything in the world. So how then can you say that being lost, the coin, in a sense, becomes worthless to its owner? Well, many years ago, back in the early 60s, there was a TV show on. It was a regular thing. I think it was on for about 3 years maybe. The Millionaire. Any of you remember that show? It was a man who was worth thousands of millions. He may have even been a billionaire. But what he would do is he would choose some individual at random, and he would write out a check, cashier's check to that person's name, for $1 million. And as I understand it, it was to be tax-free. And then he would have the man that worked for him to take that out to this individual. But the individual had to sign a contract. And sign the contract, he would not reveal where that money came from that he had. Don't tell, this was given to me by a guy that had thousands of millions, and he gave it to me. But then they would sit back to watch how that money affected the person. Did it affect them for good or for evil? To see how they would respond to all that. But I've thought about that when that show was on. I don't know about you, but I'd watch that TV show, and I'm sitting there. Hey, Tim Shoemaker, 208 North 53rd Street. Send that check anytime. Well, suppose something like that were to happen to you. That you actually got a cashier's check for $1 million to you, and it's tax-free. And just think about the excitement you probably would feel about that, having all that money all of a sudden. And you begin thinking about, what am I going to do with it? Hopefully, you're going to think about the church and how much I'm going to give to the church for service to God and accomplishing His will in this life. But I know you're going to be thinking about yourself and your family And maybe some of the things that you've always wanted you can never get, and you think, now I can have that, I can buy it. And get so excited about that. But, all right, the bank's closed, so first thing tomorrow I'm going to the bank and put this check in there and then be able to buy what I want and do what I want with that money. But you're so excited. And the next morning you get up, you get ready to head to the bank, and you look there on the table where you put the check, but it's not there. And you think, what in the world? And you panic and you start looking through the house trying to find that check. Where is it? And you look and you look and you look and you can't find it anywhere. And then you think, oh me, there was a pile of mail on that table that I brought in that was just worthless stuff that you get. Advertisements for different things and all. And I remember, I picked that up and put it in a trash bag and carried it out. That check must have been in that. And now it's gone to the dump. Well, maybe you get in your car and head to the dump. See if you can't find it. But suppose you never find it. Question, now that check still has value in it. It's still worth $1 million if you can find it. But it's lost. So it's worthless to you. You can't go down to the car lot, to that car you've always wanted, and say, I want to buy that car. I want to pay it cash. Well, yes, sir. No, but there's a catch to it. I've got $1 million. It's been given to me, but I've lost the check. Well, I'm sorry. I'm not going to let you have this car just because you had a check worth $1 million. You can't use that check for anything. You can't get any credit by it. You can't do anything. It's worthless to you. When a person is lost in sin, and he's choosing not to serve God, but now being actively involved in sin, he is serving, whether he realizes it or not, he's serving Satan. So what are you worth to God? Well, you still have that intrinsic value. Your soul's worth everything, worth more than all the world put together. But realistically, it doesn't matter how much talent you've got, how much ability. Maybe you have that. Some people that I've known, boy, they can meet people and talk with them, and people just love them, and they're willing to listen to them and everything. And you've got all that talent and that ability. But if you're serving Satan, that talent is all worthless as far as God's concerned, because it's not serving him. And so this coin this woman has that's lost, and because it's lost, it's of no value to her, even though it was of extreme importance to her. The coin was also lost at home, and it was unaware of it. There's so many people that are lost at home, and they don't know it. There are people in church every Sunday that are lost, and they don't know it. Oh, there was a time when they were baptized into Christ and became Christians, but, they're not actively serving him. They're not really doing what they need to be doing to please God, and they've involved themselves in different things that are wrong, but they still consider themselves to be a Christian. Because my name's on the roll down at some church somewhere. But they're not really serving God. They're lost and they don't know it. Charles Hodge made this statement in regard to that. He said the name Christian is applied to anyone and everyone today, including the alcoholic in the gutter and the practicing homosexual in the pew. And then he added this. He said the name Christian, like the man on the Jericho road, has been robbed, beaten, and left for dead. Because there are so many people claiming to be Christians, but who are not serving God in any way. They're lost, but they don't know it. They think they're saved and everything is well with them and God, when in reality it is not. The work of preaching and teaching people and getting them to obey God is the work that we have in the church with the Holy Spirit, to convict people of sin and cause them to understand what they need to do to become a child of God, and what they need to do as a child of God and living for him the way they should. And so that coin was lost at home. And there's so many times there are people lost at home and they simply do not know it. But that brings up a question we've asked in regard to the lost sheep. Does God care? God cared about the lost sheep because shepherds care. And God is a shepherd. And He knows what it's like to lose a sheep. But also God cares because owners care. You know, God owns everything. He owns you and me. And He knows what it's like when one of us are lost. And He cares because owners care. And that was the case here. Now, this woman cares because that coin is valuable to her. Now, it's not really that valuable monetarily. The coin that's talked about, though it's a silver coin, is only worth about 20 cents in our money today. But it was a day's pay for a day's work that she would have had in that. And it's important to her. And she's the owner of it, and she's concerned because it's lost. But though it's only worth 20 cents, it has far greater value to her than that 20 cents. I don't know if you're that familiar with it. I was not that familiar with it and reading about it. But in that day, many times a young woman would start saving up these coins till she'd got 10 of them saved up. And then they could be put together in a little circlet, and they would wear it across their forehead or maybe around their neck. They wore it, that is, when they got married. It was a sign of their marriage. But one of those coins has been lost. It's not an ordinary coin that has been lost. This is something that's of great value to her. It was a sign of the fact that she was married. Now, we care about things like that, don't we? Maybe some of you remember several years ago at Maywood Camp, one of our deacons, a brother who's passed on now, he was coming down from one of the men's cabins. They had built steps there at that time and had a rail there, and he was walking down holding that rail, and he said he heard it as his ring, his wedding ring, slipped off his finger, and he heard it hit. And he immediately stopped and started looking there for it and couldn't find it. And he told others about it. And so at different times during the day when people had time, they would go out there where he had been and started looking for it. And I spent time looking for it. And I was thinking, man, I hope I find that. I'm going to be able to make that man so happy. But as far as I know, nobody ever found that ring. Now, everybody there was concerned about it. We all took time looking for that ring. But we didn't care for it like Dennis cared for it. That wasn't just any ring. That was his wedding ring. That was the ring that his wife had placed on his finger when they took those vows to become husband and wife. And so it meant a lot to him. And so this woman has lost one of those 10 coins. But it's more than just a 20-cent coin. It's something that represented her marriage. It was a sign of her marriage. And not only that, it was also a sign, not only that she's married, but that she was faithful in her marriage. And so that's why you see the reaction that this woman takes. When she knows that coin is lost, and the Bible talks about it, number one, it says she lit a lamp. Now, that may not seem like much to you, but at that time, that was something that's considered to be very extravagant. Oil was expensive. It would have been olive oil they burned in those lamps, but it was expensive. And you didn't burn that during the daytime. You've got sunlight you can use to search. But there were probably places in the house that the sunlight's not going to get to. It may be under a table or under a chair or in a little corner somewhere. And so she lights that candle. She takes out a broom and she begins searching diligently to find that coin, because that coin is so much more valuable to her than just that a 20-cent piece. It's something of great value to her. So she does this, but that's considered a great extravagance. But not in this instance, because this is not that ordinary coin. I mean, there are a lot of coins just like it, but this one's special because it's part of that band that she wore, signifying her marriage. And so it's extremely important to her that she have that. And so it's not an ordinary coin. And it's valuable to her. And she searches for it. Now, we need to understand that when a person is lost, You can't just say, well, it's just an ordinary Joe. No. Every person is important. Every person is valuable to God. And God is concerned about them. And we need to be concerned about them. Souls are lost, and we need to be searching for them now. Don't wait. Don't put it off. There's somebody you know that's lost. Maybe someone in your family. Maybe a friend that you've known for years. Maybe a neighbor that you know is lost. But don't put off trying to go and reach them. We need to do that now. And please, now, understand this too. Do not let us begrudge the money that's spent on gospel meetings or other good works that are designed to help reach people with the gospel of Christ. People may have thought this one was being extravagant, burning that oil in the daylight, but it was that important to her. How important are the souls of lost people to us? That we would give no consideration to the money that might be spent because we know the importance of it. Romans 8:32. Paul says of God, He who did not spare His own Son, but delivered Him up for us all, how shall He not with Him also freely give us all things? God didn't spare His own Son. Don't begrudge spending money, ever how much it is, to reach those that are lost. God was willing to give up His own Son in order to reach those that are lost. And we need to have that same love for people that He had. And then again, we must not delay lest we lose the opportunity. I've talked about this before. I don't know how long ago it's been since I've talked about it. But again, years ago when I was a young Christian, I was in my freshman year at college at Freed Hardeman. I didn't have a car back then, so I couldn't come home anytime I wanted to. But the first time I got to come home, I never will forget that. I had to come home on a Greyhound bus. Left Henderson, Tennessee, took 45 minutes. We got to Corinth. The bus stopped there, and I had to get out to change buses. That next bus came 4 or 5 hours later. I didn't get home till about 1 a.m. in the morning. And so when it got time to go back on Sunday, I didn't have a whole lot of time to waste. I knew when the bus was going to be leaving, but I had time to go to church that morning. And when the invitation was offered, a young lady came forward, and she had a prayer request. And her prayer was this. She said, I want the church here to pray for my grandfather. He's extremely sick. And I want you to pray that my grandfather will live so that I can have another opportunity to teach him about Jesus. Well, I had to leave immediately after services, get home, get my stuff together. My brother drove me down to the bus station, put me on that bus to head back to Henderson. I never did find out what happened. But I got the impression from listening to her response that morning that evidently she had had several opportunities to teach her grandfather, but for whatever reason she didn't. Whether she may have felt intimidated by, this is my grandfather, he's an older man, he's got far more wisdom than I do, and I'm coming to him as a young girl and want to tell him about Jesus and what he needs to do. I don't know why she did. And I don't know if she got that opportunity. I don't know if he lived, if she got the opportunity, and if she did, if she taught him. But that's why I say, don't wait about taking the opportunity to teach someone that you know that needs to learn about Jesus. And that's one of the great lessons, I think, here. This woman acts immediately in searching for that coin because it's valuable to her. She's willing to burn oil that's going to be more expensive for her to do that, but this coin's that important. It's that important to her to look and search for it. Fortunately, she found her coin, and when she did, she's able to call her neighbors in and to say, rejoice with me, I found that coin that was lost. And the Bible tells us there was joy in the presence of the angels of God over that one sinner that is saved. Now, I know years ago hearing people talk about, You know, it says there's joy in the presence of the angels of God. And I always thought of that's the angels rejoicing, and maybe they are. But someone said, you know, the angels are there in the presence, and the joy is in the presence of the angels. That would be God who's rejoicing. And again, I believe that's true. I believe God rejoices when people respond to obey Him and become His children, or who His children have strayed are coming back to Him. Because, as we said last week, God knows the joy of finding things that are lost. That brings us to this third parable. And it's far lengthier than the others. It has a lot of lessons in it, probably more lessons than we'll ever be able to get to. But we'll spend time as much as we can here on this one, the prodigal son. This parable has been called the greatest short story ever written. When I was in high school, at Woodlawn High School, it was either my freshman year or my third year, because those were the years in English we studied literature. And one of the books that we had was Adventures in English Literature. And they had in it the parable of the prodigal son. I don't know if they put anything like that in school books today or not, but I was impressed by that when I saw that, because I'd been a Christian for a very, very short time then, if it was the third year, and I was impressed to see that, the prodigal son. And this has so many, many lessons about it. Let me just try to go through some of these tonight and then try to finish up some more of them next week, however how long it takes. But one of the first lessons I want us to learn from this is the fact that selfishness leads to separation. Now, when I talk about selfishness leads to separation, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the problem with this young man, this prodigal. The basic problem with this young man was a problem of selfishness. You ever had any problems with selfishness? I have at times. I know I have felt that same thing about it. But this is something kind of unique here. Under Jewish laws in that day, a father could, if he wanted to, he could divide his inheritance up to his children while he was alive. You have an example of it in the Bible. Back in the book of Genesis, I didn't put that on the screen, but Genesis chapter 25, verses 1 through 6. Abraham is still living when he divides up the inheritance for Isaac and for Ishmael and gives them their share of the inheritance. But in this particular instance, that's not what's happening. And that's not the normal way it's done. But in this particular instance, this young man comes to his father, and in coming to his father, he demands his inheritance. This is not one of those times when the father has opted to give them that money, their inheritance, while he's still alive. But the young boy comes and demands it of his father. Now, think about that position. What is that saying to the father when he comes and demands his share of the inheritance? Don't care about you. I'm not interested in you, Dad. I'm interested in your money. I want to know. I want that money right now. I don't know. And also, in essence, I think too, at least I've thought about this, that it's almost like he's saying to his daddy, I can't wait for you to die. I don't know how long you're going to live. I mean, you could die tomorrow. That could happen to anybody. But Dad, honestly, you're middle-aged and you're in good health. You could live another 30, 40, 50 years. I can't wait that long to get my inheritance. And so he demands it of his father. He's not even asking, pleading. He's not even trying to reason with his dad. He's demanding it. You give it to me, and give it to me now. Here's a young man that wants the possessions of his father, but he doesn't want his father. You think there's anybody like that today? You think there's anybody in our world that's like that? We're filled with a world where people want things, but they don't want to do anything for it. I know my generation there was a problem from the time of the hippies on up, that people wanted love but not marriage. They wanted to have sex with anybody they wanted to, but they didn't want to have to get married and have responsibilities in it. And we're living in a generation now of people who want the benefits that can be given to them by the government. They want the money, but they don't have to do anything to earn that money. They don't want to be responsible for it. And there are people who want the benefits of the church, but they don't want the responsibilities that the church may give to them. You know, I remember one of the things that hurt Brother Jerry the most. You know, he spent so much time visiting the hospitals. And whenever I'd go visit somebody, Jerry had already been there, and he would talk about it. But one day there was a person in the hospital and never notified anybody about it. Jerry didn't know about it, so he'd not visit her. And she was upset. And Jerry apologized publicly from the pulpit that somehow he had missed her. But as far as I know, that person never visited anybody when they were in the hospital. We want them to come see me. When I'm sick, you come see me and see what my problems are and do what you can to take care of me. But if you're sick, don't expect to see me around. We want these things without the responsibilities that come with it. And this young man wants the money that his father has, but he doesn't want to have to put up living with his father. And I think there are reasons why he didn't. You know, when he came to his father, I think this is telling that why it's a lot like people today. The first words out of his mouth when he came to his father, give me. Have you ever known anybody like that? Give me. You know, a lot of times children are like that. They don't know better. They haven't learned yet. And it's gimme, 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 gimme. And that's what you hear so many times out of their mouths. But there are a lot of times we as adults are like that. We're always wanting to be able to give to us. Someone said one time, be careful what you ask for because you may get it, only to learn it wasn't really what you wanted. This young man got the inheritance. His father gave it to him. But it ended up costing him a lot of problems. It leads to separation. Somebody points out this young man, in doing this, broke his father's heart. I can believe that. I'm trying to think what it would be like if either of my children ever came to me and said, Dad, I want you to give me my share of your inheritance right now. I don't want to wait till you're dead. You know, your possessions are more important to me. How would I feel about that? I know my heart would be broken by it. And so I can understand that the father's heart here was broken. But somebody, that wasn't what the boy intended to do. That wasn't intentions. Maybe not. But evidently he was willing to see his father suffer a broken heart if that was the only way he was going to get his money and get it when he wanted. And it led to separation. The text tells us when he got what he demanded, he left not many days after. Now, I've read that over and over and over again. It never struck me in any way except, okay, he's got what he wants and he's gone. But this is something that Brother Hodge pointed out in his book about this. He said, a man with sin on his heart is always in a hurry. This man left home in order that he might be able to live the way he wanted to live. I can't live doing what I want to do in this godly home with a godly father. He won't allow it. But let me go out into the world. Out of that world filled with people who are involved in sin daily. And they won't object to my doing what I want to do and living the way I want to live. In fact, they'll probably be willing to join right in with me. And we find that's really what happens. That he goes off into the world and he can have those people that will join with him. But remember what the Apostle Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33, that evil companions corrupt good morals. When he leaves home, where the influence of a godly father and the rules that father set down will keep him from involving himself in sin. But out in the world, he's going to be free to do whatever he wants to do, and those people are not going to disapprove of him. They're going to accept that. You're not going to find the kind of help out in the world that you need. Then, when he's away from home, then he sins. The text says he wasted his possessions. Now, it's interesting. When I'm studying the Bible, when I read the Bible, I don't ever pick up, my Greek New Testament to look at it. But every once in a while, something just hit me. I thought, well, what in the world is it talking about? He wasted, his possessions. That's the New King James Version. The word that's used here is the word dyscorpison, which means to scatter about. But it's used metaphorically of squandering property. You go to the very next chapter of Luke, chapter 16 and verse 1, and Jesus is beginning to teach another parable. And verse 1 says, he also said to his disciples, there was a certain rich man who had a steward, and an accusation was brought to him that this man was wasting his goods. Same word. He wasted his possessions. He was squandering what belonged to his master. Wasting it. He was wasting it in riotous living. Now, we don't know exactly what this was. New King James says with prodigal living. What does that word mean? Honestly, I have to be honest with you. When I would read about the prodigal son, hear people talk about the prodigal son, I didn't really know what the word prodigal meant. I just thought, okay, that's somebody's wandered away. But that's not what the word means. Do you know what the word prodigal means? Wasteful. Yeah, that's what it means. It means wasteful. And so he's wasting the possessions that he got from his father. He's wasting it in riotous living. Now the word that's used here is the word asotos. Again, I know what the word sotos means, but I didn't look it up. Came across it, somebody else was writing about it. But the word sotos, it's a noun that means save or salvation. Another form of it, soteria, means savior. So sotos, save, but it's not sotos, it's sotos. It's got that alpha in front of it. Now we've talked about that several times in the classes. The alpha placed in front of a word like that negates it. A theist believes in God, an atheist says there's no God. Sotos, to save, but with that alpha, not to save. It means it's wasted. And so he's wasted all this that his father has given him, and he's wasted it in wasteful living. But we don't know what that was. His older brother had an idea about it. We'll talk more about this later. What did his older brother say? Yeah, he's wasted it on harlots. He's taken all that money and he spent it on prostitutes. Well, that's a possibility. He could have done that, but the Bible doesn't tell us what it was. And some have suggested, this older brother, and we're going to talk a lot about him later, that this older brother may have been judging himself. He may have been thinking, if I'm out in that far country where nobody knows me, and I'm not going to accidentally run into a neighbor or a friend of mine or anybody from church, and I've got this money, that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to visit some harlots. So that may be what he's thinking, that's what he would do, and so he's going to accuse his brother of it. But we don't know what it was. But whatever it was, he's wasted everything that he had. Now, this young man had ideas, I'm sure, as he's planning it and getting ready to go, of what it's going to be like in the far country. He's going to have the best time that anyone ever had in their life. There's going to be joy there without any way to imagine how great it's going to be. But in reality, he lost so much in those efforts to please himself. Now, if you stop to think, what has he lost? Well, Obviously, he lost his money that he got from his father. All of that's gone. That's going to happen to him. But there's so many other things. And I think sometimes we never stop to think, when I choose to leave God and I choose to live a life of sin, we never think about what all we might lose as a result of it. Number one, this young man lost fellowship with his father and the comforts of home. When we make a decision, we're going to leave, we're going to go out and we're going to live life up, enjoy all the sins that we can. You've just lost fellowship with God. This young man lost fellowship with his father. Now, when I think about that, here's a young man that had a home that probably was as good a home as anyone could ever imagine. He's got a godly father that loves him, who's taken care of him and provided for him and trained him in the ways of righteousness, but he departs from it. And you know, he doesn't really appreciate what he's got there at home. I know growing up, sometimes I felt like I never appreciated what I had at home. Now, we weren't rich by any stretch of the imagination. And because of that, because sometimes we couldn't have everything we wanted to have, you know, we'd get a little disgruntled. I don't have what my friends have. And he may have just felt this way. He didn't appreciate what he had at home until he gets away from home and he loses everything that he has. And when that happens, what usually happens to a person? What's that? Yeah, they hit rock bottom. They don't have it. But that's when they usually begin to realize how good I did have it back home. What's the old saying? You never appreciate the value of water until what? Until the well grows dry. He never appreciated what he had at home till he got in that far country, and he's wasted all the money that he had. He's lost all that, and now he doesn't have that fellowship. The only one person that had really cared for him, he doesn't find that out in the world, is his father. But he's given that up. He's lost that fellowship. And now he's beginning to realize how much he's lost in that. And the home that he had. We know that in that home, the father had servants. Anybody here grow up in a home where your parents had servants? I never knew anything like that. I don't know anybody that did. But this man had servants to take care of everything that needed to be done. He had it made, but he gave it up. He had a father that would train him in the ways of God, the ways that God would have him to, but he gave it up. And now he's lost all of that. But not only that, he lost his self-respect. He left home, like I said, with great expectations of what it's going to be like, and he ends up where? He ends up in a pig pen. You know, and here's where he's losing his self-respect, in that pig pen. Not at all what he thought or what he imagined his life was going to be like, that he ends up this way. The Jews believed that there was nothing more repulsive to a Jew than tending swine. Why would that be the case? It's an unclean animal. In the book of Leviticus, chapter 11, in verse 7, the text says, "And the swine, though it divides the hoof, having cloven hoofs, yet does not chew the cud, is unclean to you." Then you come on down several verses, chapter 11, verse 26, "The carcass of any animal which divides the foot, but is not cloven-hoofed, or does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. Everyone who touches it shall be unclean." That's one of the reasons why it was such a repulsive thing to the Jew. To take care of the hogs, you're putting yourself in something that makes you unclean. William Barclay said that the job of feeding pigs was forbidden to the Jews. And, you know, I know, there was a time when Jesus cast demons out of a man and allowed those demons to go into a herd of swine, and they rushed down into the sea and were all drowned. And there were a lot of people. When they saw that, they fled. They were fearful. And they went and told the owners of the pigs. And there have been people who, and I've talked about before, that said this is a sign that Jesus was not a good man. He destroyed somebody's public property. But it may be that these Jews who owned those swine were doing something that was repulsive to their fellow Jews and something that would have been unlawful to them. And so they've lost all of that. This man has gone out and he's taken a job that's going to destroy what people would think of him in that regard, what his fellow Jews would think about it. But not only that, he gets to the point where he's willing to get out there and eat what the pigs eat. Have any of you ever raised hogs? Steve has, some of the other. My father-in-law raised hogs. And sometimes when we'd go, Donna was always disappointed I never got there in time for the hog killing. I'm not. I'm glad I didn't. I missed that. But, I would go out and help him sometimes with some of the work that needed to be done. But feeding them was kind of fun. Serge went along. Serge was a little guy, and he loved doing that. We'd go out to one of the out barns and get all this field corn that was put up. You couldn't eat it yourself, but it was good for feeding to the hogs, and we'd take it out there and feed them. And Serge would take it and throw it over the fence to them. And one time he didn't throw it far enough, and it landed in this big mud puddle, plop. Granddaddy wasn't too happy about that. But the pigs didn't care. They came tearing out there into the mud to get that and started eating it. And I thought, have I ever been hungry enough that I'd be willing to get down there with him and wrestle him for that piece of corn there to eat it? I don't think so. And then there were other things that would feed them, leftovers. Feed them watermelons. Well, that was fine with me. I don't like watermelons. I'm the only one in my family that didn't like watermelons. But everybody else loved watermelons. Well, they'd eat watermelons. You get down, and you just got that white part that's left, and then the shell of it itself. And they'd throw that out there to the hogs, and they'd tear into it. And they enjoyed that as much as I would enjoy eating ice cream. But I can't imagine ever being so hungry that I would want to get down there and wrestle them to get that watermelon rind to eat, or anything that. But this young man has lost his self-respect, and he's willing to do that. He's willing to do that to get that food to eat. Well, our time's gone, and there's so many more things we've got to say about this. We want to look at how this person has starved more ways than one, and talk about that. I'm going to talk about the decision he makes to go back home and how that's done. And we want to talk about his going back home and what that means. And hopefully there are things about that will encourage us. I know there are things about it, as I thought about it, are just so meaningful to me now. And hopefully it will be that way to you. So let's close out with a word of prayer and we'll be dismissed. Father, we thank Thee so much for all that You do for us in life, and help us, please, to realize how blessed we are and to never take these things for granted. To never believe that the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. To never think that others have it better than we do, when in reality, as Your children, Father, we have it better than anybody in this world. Help us to be appreciative of that. And because of that, help us to serve Thee faithfully all the days of our life. In Thy Son, Jesus' name we pray. Amen.